immensely proud to be here, and I look at both of you as authorities. What surprises me is usually we philosophers are the ones who engage in crazy speculations, but from what I read, just take the problem of the so-called of the Big Bang. There are those who claim there is no Big Bang. There are those who claim there was no Big Bang. There are those who claim there are repeated Big Bangs. I cannot judge about it. So my solution to this, a very weird, sorry to use this term, one, is no, it doesn't make the universe unknowable, but that's what attracted me from when I was in high school about quantum mechanics. What appears to us as our epistemological limitation, unknowable, we cannot know it, it transposes this openness into reality itself. May I just finish with explaining this with a stupid metaphor that is not precise, but I found it in a book. When you are in a video game, reality is not immersed in a video game. Reality is not fully constituted. You have a tree in the background, but since it's not within the rules of the game that you can approach that tree, of course, the tree is not fully programmed, all the details. And I think that the way I read it, quantum mechanics, the basic insight is that it moves in the same direction. Reality itself is not fully constituted. There are gaps in it. Reality is an unfinished project in itself. So I agree totally. There are many things to discover and so on and so on. But my answer would have been that uncertainty. What is uncertainty is, again, part of reality itself. When we talk about wave functions as potentialities and so on, why shouldn't these potentialities simply exist in the sense of some reality, but not our ordinary notion of reality? I'm much more open here. I think that, for example, when Einstein said, dismissed the quantum effects, the spooky action at a distance, well, maybe this could radically change our notion of space. I think that quantum physics does compel us to rethink the very basic notions of our everyday reality. But again, my idea is this one. Imagine God as a programmer, which is not, I'm an atheist. Isn't it that the lesson of quantum physics is that, in some sense, quantum physicists had, as it were, sorry for the vulgarity, thought God with his pants down, in the sense that God thought humans will never go deeper than atom. We went there and we got a lazy God. So the problem is, without God, can we think, is it possible to think reality as in itself ontologically simply incomplete, not fully structured? There are what I will use a wrong term, would have called objective theories of collapse. You put them either at the level of time, which can be different for different objects, but simply after a certain amount of time, there is a collapse. There is another theory that I often found, which is that space is the function, that after you get particles which are of a certain greatness, amount, automatically collapse happens. Then, as with observation, collapse and observation, here also I'm just as a benevolent observer confused, because I agree that this is the big problem for quantum physics. But again, we have this, how to call it, multiverse theories, that there is no collapse, just endless universes. Then you get, I got this from Carlo Rovelli in Helgoland. I think his theory is that whenever even just two tiny particles interact, in some sense, one is already observing the other, and so on. On the other hand, we have, I hope I will pronounce his name correctly, Fagini, for whom, and I'm a materialist, I don't buy this, but it's a crazy theory, for whom the collapse of superpositions means that even the tiniest part has not only some kind of self-awareness, but even free will. That this uncertainty means even in the tiniest particles, there is free will. I don't agree, of course, with this. And I also don't accept the notion of consciousness if for no other reasons than for the reason that in our even conscious experience, but that's another topic, me as somebody versed in psychoanalysis, I think the key decisions that we make are never conscious decisions. A pathetic example that I often use. Think about falling in love. You never fall in love. It's never now I look around, oh, I choose you, I fall in love. All of a sudden, you become aware that you already are in love. A question for Roger. I respect and agree with your big argument that consciousness is not calculable. Your interpretation, reference to Gödel's theorem, and so on and so on. But again, nobody will probably like this solution. But you know what no science behind this, philosophical intuition, is that, yes, it's non-calculable, but this doesn't necessarily mean that there must be some higher principle, some deeper mind which cannot be calculated. I am more and more convinced that the non-calculability, which involves a certain inconsistency, disparity, and so on, is the thing that maybe gives birth to consciousness. Consciousness is for me always rooted in something that I cannot but call a malfunctioning of a certain apparatus. You know, it's like another of my backstage maybe jokes. I think all new great things emerge from malfunctioning. For example, a French friend of mine gave me the best theory of French cuisine, that they were doing cheese and they were doing it carelessly and the cheese started to smell bad. And then they said, oh my God, why don't we make out of this a more exquisite product and so on, bad smelling French cheese or champagne. Something went wrong with wine, with some fermentation. They said, okay, you see what I mean? When things go wrong, I don't think we need a higher dimension. I believe that the deadlock itself can generate the higher dimension. Although Einstein didn't believe in a personal God, when he says God does not play dice, what he meant, there are many quotes, is precisely, for example, God who reveals himself in the harmony of all that exists, the universe is marvelously arranged, and so on and so on. So if you say God doesn't play dice, my answer, without involving God, is we all know, I hope, what Niels Bohr's answer to this was. Don't tell God what to do or what not to do, to play. I think that Einstein was here very clear, precisely along the lines outlined now by Roger. He said, and I don't agree with him here, that there is no science without religion. Religion in the sense of trust in some higher natural order that waits there to be discovered, and so on and so on. No, my idea is precisely that universe is such a mess that I wouldn't even use the term universe, because it brings out, at least for me, all those old mythological thinking which survives in, universe as the big unity, and then what is the basic unit? Is it fire, water, and so on? No, universe is an irreducible mess. There are local necessities which emerge, but always in a contingent way. So paradoxically, I think that although Einstein denies a personal God, he is, for me, still, and he said this, basically a religious guy, because he believes in this higher harmony of the universe. And I think that if there is a lesson of quantum mechanics in all its versions, is that no, we have to drop this. In this sense, although quantum mechanics, and I hate those guys who do this, is often given some kind of a fake spiritual twist, like, all this instant communication between two particles prove that there is a higher spiritual connection outside time, space, and so on. I claim that no, quantum mechanics is the only radical materialist theory. As you already said, all of you, observation does not mean there is reality, we are somewhere out. The paradox of observation advocated by quantum mechanics is that precisely we are in reality, we are a part of reality, we are not outside, which is why I will name now somebody whom I respect politically but not philosophically. For me, the worst idealist is Lenin in his Materialism and Bureaucratism, where he talks about objective laws, all preemptive. Yes, but where does he stand? From what position does he do this? I think quantum mechanics is deeply materialist because it includes us into reality. I read, correct me if I'm wrong, and it was bullshit what I read, but in one of the, I admit it, popular introduction to quantum mechanics, I read of this, what they call borrowing from the future. If a particle can do something as if borrowing the energy to do it from the future, and then when the moment of reckoning comes, it already self-annihilates itself. It is as if we have an objective social order, and you can move in a shady domain before what in my psychoanalytic jargon I would have called the big other, the order of our ordinary reality, notices it. It's as in, sorry for, again, a popular metaphor, my favorite thing in all those cartoons, Tom and Jerry, was that, you remember, I always use a cat gets close to the precipice, then it goes on walking, and nothing happens. Only when the cat looks down, oh my God, but there is nothing down, it falls down. According to some readings, doesn't something similar happen in that steady quantum domain before this quantum domain has its effects, but at another level? I deeply agree with this notion of quantum reality as different from ordinary reality, and I agree with, if I got it correctly, and brutally correct me if I'm wrong, that the key problem for me is the following one. There are some physicists, and even some, this may surprise you, pseudo-Marxist leftists who transposed onto this duality, quantum reality, ordinary reality, this boring Marxist topic of life process, creative life process, and then its reification. And they claim as if quantum waves are the domain of physical freedom, everything is open, and then you have alienation, reification, and so on. No, the big problem for me, I don't have an answer, but for this, to get an answer from any of you, I am, sorry for my vulgar metaphor, ready to sell my mother into slavery. It is. What must go on already in quantum reality that pushes it towards collapse? There must be already there. Quantum reality is for me not some happy domain, everything is possible and so on. No, it must have a certain impossibility, tension, and so on.